Hello and welcome back to another draft video. I know it's been a minute. Shout out to my members, because if you're a member, then that means you were watching this back in January, February for everyone else. Thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to look at defensive ends and edge rushers, which means not just people who rush the passer, but also people who defend the run. And I wanted to mention that because I'm not really looking at linebackers. I'm looking at people who generally, most of the time, line up on the edge. Sometimes those are linebackers, sometimes they're defensive ends. But if you're wondering why, for example, Arvell Reese isn't going to be covered in this video, that means I'm putting them in the linebackers category. Not a big deal, just wanted to mention it. If I were to evaluate Arvell Reese, I'd probably put him third in this list. I'm not really sure. I don't know. I keep going back and forth. He's an awesome player. I think this is a really solid edge class. It has blue chip talent in the first round. There are very talented players who will be available on day 2. I do think the sweet spot is going to be probably the first half of the second round. I wonder, how hard of a cliff this will fall off of, because often we see kind of a run on edge rushers in the draft. So just something to think about. If I say, oh, this is going to be, probably a second round player, that's my evaluation, doesn't mean that they aren't taken sooner just because of how valuable edge rushers are right now. Now, it's been a while since I've made a draft video, so I wanted to go over quickly how I'm evaluating prospects. First of all, traits and production. Traits relative to production, production relative to traits, meaning how fast you are, how big you are, arm length and hand size, things like that. And then production is how much are you able to get done? How much can you disrupt a quarterback? How much impact can you have on the run game? Do opposing offenses have to plan because you are on the team? Things like that. The next thing I'm looking at is how do you play in big games, in big moments? How do you play on third down as opposed to other downs? How do you play in the fourth quarter? How do you play at the end of the season when the playoffs are on the line? How do you play in the championship? How do you play against the team that you used to be on? Things like that, I think are a big tell as to do you rise to the moment or do you falter under pressure? The next thing I'm looking at is improvement every year. That could be in technique, in strength, in athleticism, in size, your ability to, recomposite your body. It could also just be in your role on the team. Maybe you went from not being a team captain to being a team captain. Maybe you went from being a 1-down player to a 3-down player, things like that. And, what do your coaches say about you? That goes into the next thing, which is character. How are you off the field? Are you a problem? Are you getting in trouble with the law? Are you skipping classes? Are there certain allegations that the NFL should care more about than they do? Things like that ultimately come back to bite a team if they don't pay attention to. So with that being out of the way, let's get into this year's edge class, which is very, very exciting. I am going to go through kind of in rankings. I'm going to go through what I see is the best and then beyond that. And I gotta say, with these first two, I went back and forth so many times. It is so close with these two, but number 1 overall, I have to go, unsurprisingly, with Reuben Bain from Miami. He's number 4, 6'3", 270 pounds, a really big frame, but shorter arms. And I don't want to overlook that point, like historically short arms. And I will talk a little bit more about that later, but let's get into who this guy is. So in high school in Florida, he appeared in 4 straight state championships, no easy feat. He had offers all over the SEC, ultimately decided to stay close to home, play for the Hurricanes. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year in the ACC, and for very good reason. He got 7.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and he became a proper starter on the team in just the 3rd game of the season. That was just how big of an impact he was making. His sophomore year, unfortunately, he did hurt his calf in the opening game. He missed 4 games, didn't come back as explosive, but this year he was back and he slimmed down a little bit. The speed is back. It is better. I am so impressed with how fast and strong he is. Super explosive off of the snap. He's so fast to the outside shoulder that he will beat tackles from the jump if they cannot match his speed. It just doesn't matter. He beats guys just by running to the outside shoulder so often. He's great with his hands, has an incredibly effective swim move to the inside that he can use as a counter to his outside speed. So tackles really cannot cheat with their positioning, which is why his speed is so effective. He also has a really good cross chop, good fake punches to draw more aggressive tackles off balance. I think we saw a little bit of that in the national championship. Looked really good against Florida this year. His real punches, though, are so violent that he has an instant advantage. You wouldn't necessarily think that that's the case, this with him having shorter arms, but he makes it work very well. He has strong arms, causes a lot of fumbles. He's very persistent. He is a guy who plays through the whistle, plays really hard, does a really good job swarming the ball carrier. That was really obvious when they played Notre Dame. He got this interception all the way at the sideline on a double tipped pass where a lot of players probably wouldn't have followed a play like that. Usually, edge rushers are players who go hard on every single snap. If they can let off the gas for a few seconds, then they will, but not Reuben Bain. He can play inside, he can play outside linebacker, and a good defensive coordinator will see him as a very versatile piece and will use him creatively because of how fast and how smart he plays. His speed to power looked really good against Florida this year. That game, I thought he did a really good job impacting the quarterback, even when he didn't get to him before the throw. You could tell the quarterback was instructed to be very aware of where he was on the field, which, like I talked about, that is something that is very important. How aware of you are opposing offensive coordinators, and he definitely checks that box. In the Fiesta Bowl against Ole Miss, he made a really big play that would have put a team with an average kicker out of field goal range. He powered through the right tackle who was too big to struggle that much. Like, it just shouldn't have happened. Forced Trinidad Chambliss to throw too early. Obviously, they still ended up getting the field goal, but like I said, on most teams, that's the kind of impact play that saves you those 3 points. I do think he struggles to seal the edge at times. We saw that against Notre Dame. The disengage just isn't great, and in the NFL, you're going against guys who are better than in college, specifically in terms of grip strength and arm length and the kind of things that get you off balance, especially as a player with shorter arms. I just think he's so successful with his speed and power that he has a hard time putting on the brakes at times, and that shows. So to stop a run where he has to stop, change direction, it gives blockers time and the leverage that they need to lock him up. And that's something that he's going to have to work on in the NFL. But I don't think he's bad in the run game overall. I think he's really good. He has a strong anchor. He absorbs double teams without being pushed back. Again, the opposing coordinator is having to plan around where he will be. Sometimes they'll line him up pretty much by himself on the weak side and say, go ahead, run counter, run this way. We're putting all our guys on one side and then Reuben Bain on the other. Go ahead and run at him, because that's the kind of confidence that Miami had in him. And his short arms do make tackling hard, and that shows at times, but he can cover so much ground. He is so relentless. His high motor does not begin to cover how this guy plays. We will have a more accurate picture of his actual arm length soon. He was not at the Senior Bowl or anything like that, so I believe we do not know the official measurements. It truly is his one real detractor. Like I said, he struggles with tackling and stuff, but pretty much everything he struggles with in that regard can just be looked at as, yeah, that is a shorter arm struggle. That's what that means. But his arms are very strong. Against Indiana in the Natty, he got a one arm run stop right on the goal line where the running back is just powering through to run through that exact kind of tackle, and he just can't because one arm was too strong for him. I think he holds up well against pulling blockers in motion. He doesn't concede space, takes a really big body to stop him once he has any momentum, and I think he is an any down problem kind of guy in the NFL in year one. I think he's an instant impact player. This guy is a monster he's gonna be a top 5 pick in my opinion. Obviously it depends on how many teams there feel like they can afford to take a non-quarterback. With Dante Moore going back to school, that seems likely. I don't think a second quarterback will be picked until maybe the Jets at pick 16. We will see. But if you're watching this because your team picked him, feel good about the pick. I wouldn't worry too much about the arm length because your team clearly feels like that isn't that big of a deal, that's something that they can work with. He's versatile enough that they can make him work. You have a game wrecker. He can defend the run, crush pockets, bend around tackles, wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks, and he is going to be a problem. A team would have to mess up big time for him to be anything less than a great edge rusher in year one. I think an NFL coach could get him to improve his disengage, get him some moves for when he loses that initial part of the rep, and then he could be well on his way to being a Pro Bowler very early in his career. This is a top 5 player in the draft. Now, like I said, I went back and forth with him and the second guy. The second guy is David Bailey, because David Bailey has all of the traits, right? David Bailey has the traits that you want, and Reuben Bain doesn't necessarily. So your evaluation should probably be based on how heavily do you weigh that arm length thing, because maybe it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but if his arm length is what we think it is, then it is a historic outlier. No one has been very successful as an edge rusher with his arm length. We have also never seen a prospect like this with his arm length, at least in my memory. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious how you guys all evaluate that. How much do you weigh traits versus production, especially considering, by all accounts, the character is there, and he is the kind of player that you would want in your locker room and on your team. So let me know what you guys think, but for me, just barely, he is the number one edge rusher in the class. So like I said, members got this video early. I'm also going to be doing a film breakdown on some of these players' tape, including David Bailey. I have, I believe, 5 different plays I want to look at for him, but that's something to think about if you want to know a little bit more about these players, if you want to see a little bit more. I am going to be posting some members-only videos breaking down some of the edge rusher tape. The next edge rusher I want to talk about is David Bailey from Texas Tech, number 31, 6'3", 250 pounds. He was a state champion his senior year of high school at Mater Dei. That is not the Chula Vista Mater Dei for the Chargers fans watching this. A lot of you live in San Diego. It's the Santa Ana Mater Dei. He was the California Defensive Player of the Year. Anyone who grew up in California knows how insanely competitive sports are there. He was one place away from being a 5-star recruit, like in the rankings, one spot away. So he was right there. He turned down SEC and Big Ten offers to play at Stanford, where he has family ties. He was a freshman All-American in his first year. His sophomore year was his real breakout year, though. He's all over the highlights against Hawaii. He put up 3 sacks in one game, kept climbing his junior year, got 7 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and ultimately transferred to Texas Tech after Andrew Luck, the Stanford general manager, fired the head coach. So he finished the regular season second in sacks in the nation with 13.5. This year, Texas Tech lost against Oregon, but David Bailey did everything an individual player possibly could. He had a nice third down sack against Oregon's weaker tackle, multiple pass breakups, including one on a pass headed straight to the end zone that would have been a touchdown. He created a pressure that led to an interception, which was one of the few bright spots in the entire game for Texas Tech. I mean, you guys, if you watched that game, you know how ugly it was. And I look at the Texas Tech defense and I kind of think most of these players kind of fell apart except for David Bailey, you know, and maybe that's not fair because they didn't have much of an offense backing them up, but I think it's a really good sign if a team is falling apart around you. How well can you play as an individual, right? With no one there helping you out, what are you able to get done? And David Bailey absolutely crosses that threshold. He lines up outside of the tackle, occasionally inside of another rusher, sometimes acts as a stand-up rusher, sometimes he'll even drop into coverage, so a creative defensive coordinator can do whatever he wants with this guy. He has some great pass rush moves. He's very creative. I think his spin move stands out the most. It's so successful because the tackle is so used to all the hand fighting, all the very violent hand play that he does, that, you know, he spins out of their arms while they're trying to engage with the front of the chest, and it's very effective. Good club move. His rip move is great against shorter guards who have kind of a leverage advantage. I think it sets up a nice cross chop for him. He could use some technical refinement of his pass rush, but honestly for me that kind of shows how high the ceiling is, right? Like if he has this many moves now and he is not technically where you want him to be and he's already this successful, you kind of look at that and go, oh, we can get him and we can improve him. This isn't all that there is. There is so much more to this player. For me, I think he probably has the highest floor and highest ceiling, specifically in terms of pass rush in this class, which is why I have such a hard time evaluating him versus Reuben Bain, right? And like I said, the traits are very much there for this guy. He's exactly where you want him to be. He's just not as refined as you would like. And so you're kind of weighing who he is now versus who he could be. And so every NFL team is going to have a different evaluation. You got to look at how successful is our defensive line coach and our defensive coordinator at using players creatively, at getting the best out of them, and technical refinement, right? So that is going to be what the variety is, but it is very possible he goes number 2 overall to the Jets. I 100% could see that happening, and I would not think that that's a bad pick at all. And one of the things I think is a really big deal about Bailey is if his initial move doesn't work, if the tackle wins the rep right away, he isn't stopped in his tracks very often. He keeps his feet moving. He can turn a failed rep into a bull rush that closes the pocket. So tackles never get a break against him. A lot of guys against pass rush move, they kind of lack that quality, and it's a quality that translates very well into the NFL, where you're just not going to beat everyone by being faster, by being stronger, by winning with your initial move, because these players have the tape on you, they know what to expect, and they are professionals. So it's a good sign when, yes, you have very good first step like David Bailey does, but it's not the only thing that you depend on. So He's someone with a great first step, like I said, elite bend, that will translate really well. 99th percentile in pass rush win rate with 23.7%. 84th percentile in run stop percentage. He can disengage at a really high level. I think that's something that if you put him over Reuben Bain, that might be why. Because in the run game, sometimes tackles will try to hit him and then scoop block the next guy, like at the next level. And when that happens, they don't even touch him. It takes so much more than that to slow him down. He's so quick at getting around guys. He has the second most tackles for loss in college football. He's so shifty, it's really hard for run blockers to get him out of a run lane. At the next level, he might struggle against bigger guys if he lines up with his hand in the dirt on the interior. As an edge, he'll be able to dodge the brunt of a block and shoot the gap. I think it is pretty rare to see him just straight up out physical a blocker, but he's really shifty, and that would require a larger blocker to also be more athletic. So that is definitely something I think a lot of coordinators can work with. And at the next level, you want someone in the run game who can shed blocks that are square to the body. He will struggle with that early on. That's going to make it a little bit harder to seal the edge. But speaking of size, he's a little bit small in terms of weight. I'm not sure how much more he can put on. But again, that's something that every NFL team is going to evaluate differently. How much success have you had with body recomposition in your defensive players? But make no mistake, this guy is a dog. He has 7 career forced fumbles. He plays so aggressively, at times too aggressive, especially against the run. He does struggle against zone read concepts that kind of leave him vulnerable to rushing quarterbacks. It's something that needs to be figured out at the professional level. This is someone I think will likely go top 10. It would not be shocking, like I said, if he went top 5. The team that takes him needs to have other resources for stopping the run other than him while he develops in that area for his rookie year and beyond. But make no mistake, this is a year 1 starter who will give quarterbacks headaches on 2nd and 3rd down from the get-go. You do not want to be in a 3rd and long situation against David Bailey. He is someone who will shine at the combine. If you're seeing him farther down in mocks, expect him to rise when he gets a chance for the traits to really shine, especially when Reuben Bain's traits may or may not all the way be where NFL coaches want him. But he's fast, he's strong, he plays from snap to whistle. If he's on your team, you have so much to be excited about with David Bailey. So here is where the rankings vary a lot from person to person. For me, at number 3, I have TJ Parker. He is the edge rusher out of Clemson. Number 3, 6'3", 265 pounds, very long arms, like exceptionally long arms. Started his career with Penn State. He was an instant impact player for the Nittany Lions defense. 12.5 tackles for loss, which broke the record for a freshman at Penn State. 6 forced fumbles, not bad for a freshman. He can be a stand-up rusher. He can be an edge rusher with his hand in the dirt. Either way, he is a strip sack machine. He's versatile. He's fast. Occasionally, they drop him into coverage pretty successfully. He can line up on the outside of guards, outside of tackles. Against Pitt in 2024, he got this sack where he just pulled the ball straight out of the quarterback's hands before going down. I almost felt bad for what he did to that quarterback all game. Ended up with 4 sacks. Against Florida State, he put the tackle on skates despite appearing to be like 30% smaller than him. He just has so much power. That year, he got the forced fumbles record for Clemson with 6. And even in 2023, it seems like he had that trait where if he gets a hand on the quarterback, they're going down. They're just not going to be able to escape him. And he does not suffer from the over-aggressiveness trait that a lot of young players, especially in this particular edge rusher class, do, where, they know they need to be fast, so they overcommit and are easily dodged, easily just quarterback steps up in the pocket and doesn't have to think about him anymore. Not with TJ Parker. He also does a great job defending the run, plays patiently as an outside linebacker. He is great at disengaging blocks, using length to secure the edge. At times, his tackling isn't great. It would probably be a problem if his arms weren't so long, but that's something NFL coaches would take note of. But because his arms are so long, you kind of look at that and go, yeah, that's something that we can fix. That's something that we can improve at the NFL level. Parker is so good with his responsibilities, does not overcommit. He doesn't allow ball carriers to get past his lanes, and I think what stands out about him so much is he's fantastic with his hands, like very, very technically sound. His highlights are teach tape for swipes, cross chops, handling the long arm, grabbing and pulling the tackle forward. He's got a great Euro step. In 2025, he got 39 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. It's not really the year you want him to have in terms of production after last year. But if you look at all of Clemson, that's pretty much true for everyone. I don't think Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anyone on Clemson you felt like really took a step forward this year, so I am hesitant to put that on him. I know it was a tumultuous situation for them, but some of those sacks came against really weak competition, so this is kind of a significant pass rush regression. But in 2024, you saw what he could be. He got 11 sacks. You hope that he could keep that up, but he didn't. Ultimately, that is kind of why I've put him in the next tier of edge rushers. He's not as bendy or twitchy as Reuben Bain. He'll have his limits as a speed rusher, but his technique makes him very effective regardless, and technique translates. He's very persistent. He's shown consistent career growth despite not performing quite as well as you want in 2025. He plays really hard, makes plays seemingly out of nowhere because he had to travel so far from where he lined up. And we saw that when he recovered a fumble on a pass to the sideline, 15 yards behind him against South Carolina. So I know this isn't seen as important for a non-quarterback, but he's very confident at the podium. I appreciate his apparent attitude about big games. That's something that I think is kind of rare for young players. Take a listen.
It's third down. The offense is going for it. Like, what does it sound like in your ears?
To me, I don't really hear it. Like, when I'm playing, it's white noise for me. But when you're kind of out that moment on the field, like, it's just surreal. You know what I'm saying? Just, Clemson and all 80 plus thousand fans in the stadium just on top of each other, man. It's surreal, man. I absolutely love it, man. I just can't wait to hear it and to see it. So just seeing all the hype that everybody's building up with this game. Obviously, I know it's a big game because it's week one, but at the end of the day, we still playing Clemson. All the antics and all the saying Death Valley Jr., all that stuff like that, I can care less about it, you know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, we got to spot the ball and play. So for me, it's easy, because I'm all about the work. I'm all about just playing ball and, having fun with it. All the hype and stuff that comes with playing at a high level and being at a school like Clemson. So, you just got to tune that stuff out because at the end of the day, like, they only going to talk good about you when you're doing good, and they're going to talk bad about you when you're doing bad. So it's up to you to control the narrative of what goes on, so.
I think there are a lot of players at this level who can kind of take after fans, making excuses. I think ego tends to be a really big problem at the college level, not in terms of like, a personal judgment on these players, just it is difficult to look at games objectively and try really hard to get better. That's a difficult thing for, someone in their early 20s or younger to do. And that's not a football specific problem. I think athletes in general are kind of like this. It's refreshing to see a young person acknowledge their agency in this way. He seems mature, seems to love football, live for the big moments. That's very clear in how his coaches, his parents, everyone around him talks about him. He also said he didn't play basketball because they don't appreciate defensive players these days. And again, I just think that that shows somebody who really cares about the fullness of the game, about playing hard in every moment. I don't know, maybe that's an old school take of mine, but I like it a lot. To me, this is a day one starter in the NFL. He comes in with similar excellence in run defense and in pass rush, and so you have a really balanced player who you can look at as a future complete edge for your team. 80th percentile in pass rush win rate at 15.8%, 74th percentile in run stop percentage. He is technically advanced in a way that not many NFL edge rushers are in a way. So, he had a rough year in 2025, but I think the floor is really high. I think there are flashes of, an immensely high ceiling with the right fit in the NFL. So he absolutely could grow into a great edge rusher, great run defender. And this is a 3-down kind of defensive end. Like I said, he could excel in a 4-3 scheme, I think, but he is versatile. He can work in multiple alignments. This is probably a mid to late first round pick. It would not shock me if in a couple years people are looking around going, wait, how did this guy not go top 10? Because I just think that his starting out floor is really high and the flashes are there. At the right NFL team, he is going to have a serious rookie year. Not far behind him is Keldrick Faulk, who I have at number 4, Auburn number 15. He's 6'6", 285 pounds, and this is a player who will be 20 years old when he is drafted, an increasingly rare quality. But I think that's really important because edge rushers tend to peak a little bit younger, and you want them as young as possible on their second contract if things work out. If you know me, I'm a Chargers fan, and I look at Tuli Tuipulotu, and that is one of the best things about him is when he gets that second contract, he's still going to be really young. You have so many years to look forward to from a young player like that. So this guy is young, but he looks like he was made in a lab to play defensive end at the NFL level. He's tall, strong, big frame, long arms, big hands, and he's so young that I think teams may be willing to overlook some of the technical issues with him just because, they believe he has so much potential still to live up to. I think that makes a lot of sense. He was a 4-star recruit out of Alabama. He played in every single game his freshman year, ended up with 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. In 2024, he got 9 sacks and 45 pressures, 33 run stops. He really established himself as one of the best edges in the SEC, which is no joke to do. A lot of competition in the trenches in that conference. Overall, 2024 was probably his best year, but he had his best individual game performances this year, his junior year, against 2 playoff-bound teams in Georgia and Alabama, 13 tackles and 2 sacks just between those 2 games alone, plus a forced fumble. I thought he had some quality reps against Caden Proctor on Bama, who could end up being a day 1 draft pick. I have him graded at day 2, but either way, I think it's really important to see how players play against future NFL players, and Caden Proctor certainly is one of those. It's a good sign when a player outplays how his team is performing, and even though the defense overall has struggled, he has stuck to his standard of play. He has some solid pass rush moves. He likes to use a swim move or a push and pull. That one really makes his arm strength stand out. He could be more violent with his hands. It doesn't seem like his strength is fully utilized. Another thing that I think NFL teams are going to look at and go, yeah, I think we can get even more out of this guy because all the traits are there. His hands are often too slow, which lets tackles get their hands on his chest first. His jump off the snap isn't always great, but there are flashes which lead me to believe that he could improve a lot in that regard in the NFL. I feel similarly about his speed to power potential. I think we saw more of it in 2024, but he's strong enough that it should be better than what we saw this year. So a couple years into his NFL career, I wouldn't be surprised if his pass rush really comes online when he figures out the speed to power thing. His tackling is solid, and with his arm length, if your NFL team has a good defensive coaching, that should improve even more. He isn't the speedy, bendy archetype of a true pass rushing edge defender, but he rushes from both sides, sometimes a stand-up rusher, occasionally dropping into coverage. So, he's got that versatility that coordinators will like. He stands out primarily as a run stopper who puts some nasty tackles for loss on tape. A lot to be excited about with him in the run game. Often faces double teams and still closes running lanes on either side of him at the line of scrimmage. It's really rare to see a blocker successfully push him backwards in any situation, even when they're in motion. He is just such an unmovable player. Really strong, huge man, fantastic anchor for setting the edge, great gap discipline, less refined tackles, they look like mild inconveniences to him rather than real blockers. He just shoves them to the side with his eyes on the ball carrier, which is just an awesome trait. He chases down running backs, does a great job taking good angles, preventing cutbacks. Because of his size, he could be a really effective strong side end in a 4-3 scheme because of how hard it is to flush him out of his lane. A lot of people do have him as a top 15 pick, and I think it is likely that he goes high because of the traits, especially as, defenses are trying to get bigger. They're trying to catch up with a lot of the run-heavy offensive schemes that have emerged in the last 5 years. I personally have him as a late first rounder. I think he probably ends up going somewhere between 15 and 25. I'd be more comfortable closer to 25, but this draft in general kind of falls off around 20, and at least in my opinion. So it is possible he goes higher than that just because, the talent there in other positions may be kind of lacking. And like I said, there could be a run on edge rushers. So he'll be a great NFL player. I think it may take him a little longer to come online than you would like for a first round pick. And I think he needs a lot of technical work in his pass rush game. He just doesn't have a lot of answers right now, but your run defense improves immediately on his side of the field. He has the traits, and so if you can afford to pick a longer term project, he is absolutely worth your first round pick. I think he is a fantastic player, and I think he will get better and better if he lands in a place that can help him evolve technically as a pass rusher. He's smart. He is so young. He'll be 20 to start his rookie season. He's going to get even stronger. I know it isn't a super exciting player in terms of pass rush, but he is the floor-raising pick of the first round, in my opinion, and he's one of the players I'll be doing a film review on because I do think the pass rush moves that he has are really good. He just needs to add to the arsenal, but a lot to be excited about with Keldrick Faulk. The next player I have on this list may be a little bit surprising to you. I understand that I'm a little higher on this guy than other people are. I think that there's a lot to be excited about. I'm talking about LT Overton at Alabama. I have him at number 5 overall on my list. He is number 22. 6'3", 278 pounds. Love the traits on this guy. Huge arms, huge hands, exactly my kind of edge rusher. He may be more of what you think of as a true defensive end than an edge rusher. redshirt, but there's a lot of potential there. He was a true 5-star recruit out of Georgia, did not redshirt, immediately played as a freshman in 2022 at Texas A&M. Both his parents were athletes. His dad is an athletic director. He played football. I believe his mom played volleyball somewhere in the SEC. He made a really big impact in 2024 when he transferred to Alabama as a rotational player, an occasional starter. He ended up making a big impact in the run game, especially against Wisconsin and Michigan, with 13 total tackles between those games alone. I thought he did a great job that year of setting the edge, not let anyone move him back, hitting quarterbacks hard from the blind side. He plays so violently. He showed the bend that it takes to get outside of tackles, that, and someone as large as him probably shouldn't be able to have the kind of bend that he has. It's not elite bend, but for his size, it's really impressive. He gets strip sacks, not because he does these like textbook punches or hits the wrist or any particular technique. He is just so big and hits quarterbacks so hard that often the ball is just shot out of there. In fact, he's kind of technically raw, but the power is just incredible. In 2025, I think his pad level improved a lot. It allowed him to crush the pocket, and it was the exact kind of improvement that I was looking for going into the season with him. This season, he got 6 tackles for loss, 42 tackles, and 4 sacks. I know the sack numbers aren't great, but if you watch him, he looks a lot better on film than the stats say. He's not the only good defensive lineman on his team, so often he's doing the dirty work, but trust me, you watch the highlights on this guy, you are going to be so excited. Occasionally, he struggles with balance when he wins the rep to one side. When his rip move gets caught, he can get brought to the ground. Definitely something an NFL team will need to improve, but he shines in the run game. He is so strong in his upper body that it's just hard for blockers to lock him up. His disengage is fantastic. A runner cannot break a tackle when they choose his lane. He does not let runners by him at the line of scrimmage, and he's not a great open field tackler, but if you draft this kind of player, that's not really what you're looking for. You're looking for someone that you cannot run right by. And it definitely could be improved at the NFL level, especially with his insane wingspan, which even on a 6'3" frame, his wingspan still looks insane. He isn't very technically sound with his hands, but he's very violent. I wish he had a better swipe move. He is so strong. The potential for that is so elite, but that's, again, one of those things that an NFL defensive line coach will look at and go, yeah, I can work with that. We can definitely improve that. And he's versatile. He can play on the inside, attack guards. He holds up in the run game because of his size and anchor no matter where you put him on the line. I think the mismatch opportunities at the next level will have coaches very excited. There is a reason that certain coaches like big guys up front no matter what. LT Overton would probably be a better fit in the interior, but he has the versatility. He could be a defensive end in a 3-4 scheme. It depends on what a coach needs from him, but the agility he has as a big man would match up well inside, and he works outside best as a run defender. So whatever your team needs, he definitely can contribute from early on in his career. He does the dirty work for the line, takes the double teams, refuses to get pushed back in any scenario, and he's a tone setter in run defense. He sets the edge with violence, and for his size, I was actually really impressed with his conditioning. Anytime you have a larger player at a high motor position like edge rusher, you want to look at how do they play in the fourth quarter? How do they play later in the season? And at no point did I think, looks like he's getting a little tired. He is in that game for 4 quarters. He did miss the SEC championship game because of an unknown health issue. There have been rumors that it might have been something severe like blood clots. That is not confirmed, so I am not saying by any means that is 100% what happened. I haven't seen anything to substantiate it, but sometimes rumors are true, right? If you guys have information about that, then you can come to your own conclusion about that. If it is something serious like blood clots, then that is something that teams have to consider long term, because we have seen NFL careers ended early because of, things that can turn into life-threatening issues. So I hope that's not the case for his sake, but NFL teams will have that kind of medical information, even if we don't. He will definitely need to work on his pad level. It improved a bit in 2025 from 2024, but it isn't quite where you want it. His first step is very explosive, but the timing off the snap isn't necessarily great. I think this is a big reason his production isn't what you'd expect for his athleticism and size, which is why I think his ceiling is so high, and you didn't necessarily see it this year. I think he'd be a great fit on a 4-3 front. He can handle the heavy side duties in the run game. I think most of his issues are coachable and fixable at the next level. The traits are fantastic, and I think the run stopping ability alone makes him a serious floor raising player for your run defense in his rookie year. So it's a safer bet than most edges in this range, and that is why I have him a little higher on the list than most people. I think most evaluators are looking at ceiling primarily, but I think once you get past those like first 20 picks on the board, especially in this draft, you're kind of looking more at a floor raiser than a ceiling raiser. Just my perspective, but I'm really excited about this player. I haven't really heard much about him coming out of the Senior Bowl, but I do know that his traits were confirmed in terms of his height and weight. I understand that I am higher than consensus on him, but this is my kind of edge rusher. I think there's potential for him to rise to the end of the second round, but I think, there's a decent chance that he could be taken later than that. The medical issues really throw a wrench in trying to evaluate where teams can and should take him, but I definitely think he is worthy of a high second round pick, and I think if you're able to get him even later than that, he could end up being a draft steal, even though he is more of a developmental player at the next level. The next player I want to talk about is kind of the opposite profile of LT Overton, and that is Cashius Howell, who I have here at number 6. Texas A&M, number 9, 6'2", 248 pounds. That is a much smaller guy. After spending time at Bowling Green, the former 3-star recruit landed at Texas A&M in 2024. He is your 3-4 outside linebacker kind of player. He rushes the passer. He drops into coverage. He played behind Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton as a rotational player in 2024, but his pass rush was consistently successful despite making such a big leap in the competition that he was going up against. He has fantastic bend, consistent speed around the outside, sets up a really nice inside swipe move. Speed to power is viable against the smaller tackles that he faces, but it's definitely not going to hold up against the bigger NFL tackles. He is so fast at chasing down quarterbacks. They often don't get all the way to the sideline like quarterbacks try to extend the play and throw the ball away. They really don't get the chance to do that against Cashius Howell. He has a fantastic rip move that allows him to get leverage despite his lesser size, a lethal spin move that I wish he would use more often because it is so fantastic and so fun to watch. He stutter steps and swims by tackles. He isn't super technically advanced outside of those moves, but he's violent with his hands, clearly willing to do anything to win. I have no doubt he can pick up more pass rush moves in his rookie year with how quick he is. And he beats tackles by beating them vertically, and because of that, sometimes he leaves a big lane for quarterbacks to escape through. We saw that versus Texas. It might concern teams that have to face a lot of rushing quarterbacks, which is increasingly the case for every division in the NFL. In the run game, he has been a lot less successful, which is why he's a little lower on this list for me. And it makes sense. A lot of time he's being blocked by players who are maybe even 50 pounds heavier than him, and he just doesn't have much of an answer for that. He struggles to disengage because he's bracing to take huge hits. He just doesn't have the mass to absorb them, so he has to brace, which makes it harder to shed blocks. His run stop percentage is 17th percentile. It's pretty bad for someone that people are talking about a first round draft pick for. So to draft him, you really have to accept that he is probably only good for second and long, third and long kind of passing downs early in his career at least. But he is so unbelievably good at what he is good at. He cannot play a lot of defensive snaps because he is messy in the run game with his feet. He's too small to really shed blocks effectively. He is a really good tackler considering his shorter arms. So in terms of what he can control, he is doing really well at. I imagine he would be really good in coverage too for coordinators who value that. He can flip his hips really well for an edge rusher, which isn't something you usually get a good look at. But like I said, historically short arms, it appears to be like maybe a little over 30 inches. NFL defensive ends are typically around 33 inches. Higher end ones tend to be, even over 34. His draft stock depends a lot on how he measures, because if his arms are as short as we think they are, there is a high percentage of teams who will say they just can't afford to spend a higher draft pick on someone like this, and if they think he is the best edge rusher available, they may just go with a different position. Regardless of his arms, he is just a smaller guy. There were a few reps that you could see where it was just easy for tackles to put him on the ground because he was trying to spin, trying to get fancy in some way that doesn't allow him to anchor, and he's just not as strong as a lot of the guys he's going against, and that's a problem that he'll have in the NFL. But don't get me wrong, this is a guy who plays hard, hits quarterbacks hard. He's violent. He has improved tremendously throughout his career, so he's on a steep upward climb, but a lot of teams are just going to skip on him because they have certain traits thresholds that he may not cross. I have him in the middle of the second round, similar to LT Overton, but for me, it's a matter of floor, it's a matter of style, and I prefer the high run stopping floor over this, but every team has different needs. I would not draft someone in the first round who can't turn into a 3-down edge, and for me, that is Cashius Howell, unfortunately. But there are definitely schemes where he is going to make a lot of sense, so it is very possible that he goes in the first round, and there is a lot to be excited about in terms of getting after the quarterback if he ends up on your team. Next up at number 7, I have Gabe Jacas from Illinois. Number 17, 6'3", 275 pounds. He was a wrestling state champion in high school, and you can kind of see it in how physical he plays, how strong of a core he has. The Big Ten Network actually aired a story on how hard he works and how much film he watches. His story going from, an unrecruited high school player to what he is now. You can watch it on YouTube. It's called Spotlighting Gabe Jacas, The Journey. He has a fantastic first step considering how big he is. He's faster than he looks with those really long strides. He has some good moves. He's very strong. 16% pass rush rating, pretty solid. He is very successful at getting after the passer because he runs stunts really well because of his speed. He's so hard to stop with a head start of motion. It's not going to be easy to stop him at the NFL level. He's versatile. He can stand up and be a 4-eye, 6 or 7 tech, whatever you like in a 3-man front, he can be. I think he struggles at times with reading the defense. He seems to be a little late on a lot of reads, so his run defense isn't quite where you want it to be. That kind of sets his timeline back a little bit in terms of how long it will take him to, be the role that you want him to play in the NFL. But he has the traits. He has the traits required to be a run stopper. With the right coaches, he'll develop in that direction. The bend isn't great, but he's really fast. He has fantastic reach, which makes a difference for a quarterback's ability to escape and step up in the pocket. He has long arms. It shows in his tackling ability. He's violent with his hands. I'm curious what the hand measurements are because they look absolutely huge on tape. He causes fumbles left and right because of how violent he plays, and I think he has a lot of development to do, but he can become an every down edge for you just because he is viable in every situation. There's no situation where you go, okay, he's the guy that offensive coordinators are going to want to target. Some team out there is going to be really excited about him because they know their staff can mold an excellent edge rusher out of what he gives you. He plays hard. He has the pieces. I think with good coaching, Jacas will be a formidable 3-down player, and I think, Illinois has proven that they're a solid defensive line school. I think a lot of good edge rushers and defensive tackles come out of there. They teach the technical aspects pretty well, so he will be well versed in everything he needs to learn to succeed at the NFL level. And to me, this is, maybe a late second rounder. I think we need to hear back from the combine and, see what happens with him athletically and in terms of his traits. But I really like this player. I think there's so much to be excited about for him. And so right now I'm giving him a late second round, early third round grade, but that could improve based on what comes out of the combine and everything else that we hear about him in terms of measurables. But he's definitely someone I want to do a film breakdown of. All right, next we have a player who I think for some people has kind of flown under the radar, plays for Mizzou, but he is 6'5", 262 pounds, and he is a fantastic run defender. He is so physical, so hard to move with blocks. He plays so violent. I am personally very excited about this player. Had a great game against Virginia this year. Long arms, strong legs. He plays with a lot of saltiness. You get a sense that he just gets himself mad before games and just takes it out on the guy in front of him. He's very chippy with opposing teams. He's always the guy trash talking. Some teams are really going to like that. Some teams are missing that in their defense. He has started to develop some pass rush moves. None are very refined, but he definitely improved over the course of the season. He will spin, cut inside, club, but he mostly is just trying to bull rush guys to crush the pocket. He does not have a great jump off the snap. He's not the most explosive, but that's not what you're really drafting him for. He's more of a run defending edge. It just makes his pass rush that much worse because if he doesn't win right away, he can kind of struggle to make a second move because of his lack of quickness. I think when you get to this point in the draft, that's going to be a pretty common trait that you see. He's fast once he gets his feet going. He did successfully chase down a lot of quarterbacks. He just doesn't have that initial burst, if that makes sense. I think it's a big deal, though, that he gets to quarterbacks because he doesn't give up on the play. He can be a good finisher. He can function as that closer on snaps where he is opposite of a true pass rusher, which is the case for a lot of teams that will be looking to pick somebody, in the second round or later. And his disengage is fantastic. He shoves tackles to the side like they are weightless. It feels impossible to rush next to him, to rush his lane and not just immediately get wrapped up. He is so strong. I see him disrupt passes by grabbing a tight end and just shoving them into the quarterback from like 4 yards away. So strong. He runs people over, absorbs chips like they're nothing. He can shoot gaps in tight spaces to get behind the line. He doesn't attack the outside shoulder a lot, but he is successful at times when he does. His bend is solid, but it's just his quickness isn't necessarily what you want in a 3rd and long situation. But he plays scrappy, unrefined football. He's focused. He's in control. He sets the edge remarkably well, and with some technical refinement, I think he can be a great player. Sometimes they line him up at Mizzou on the interior in odd fronts, which I think is a great option on passing downs. It can give you some bull rush juice in the interior when you need to collapse the pocket, and he's really good at grabbing quarterbacks who try to escape the pocket up the middle, which is kind of a rare trait in this class. If you are looking at your edge roam and you go, we have a great guy who can get outside, but we need someone who can prevent quarterbacks from escaping, because, if you always succeed toward the outside, you create big rushing lanes for quarterbacks, and that's a problem. It's a problem I think a lot of NFL teams are finding that they have as quarterbacks get more athletic and quick. This may be the kind of guy that you want as an answer to that. It's weird because his ability to jump off of the snap isn't fantastic, but in open space, he's a pretty good tackler. He has good agility in that sense, so it could be something that an NFL team believes that they can improve, which could improve his bull rush. He's only 20 years old. He has a lot of room to grow. You would have to be patient to draft him in the late 2nd round, which is where I think he's likely to go, maybe a little higher, depending on, how many teams are looking to improve run defense. But to me, there's a lot to be excited about with him. I think because of how much refinement he needs, I wouldn't be comfortable taking him higher than, the middle of the 2nd round. But, some team out there might see it differently, and I could see him going higher. If he's on your team, again, he's one of those players I wouldn't worry too much about where you took him, because he is going to be very valuable to your team pretty quickly. Next, we have a player that, I am a little lower on than I think a lot of people who've been watching Texas Tech. It's Romelo Height. He's 6'3", 235 pounds. He will be 25 as a rookie. He's a 6th-year senior, and, to me, I'm counting that against him a lot. By the time he finishes his rookie contract, he will be looking at 30. To me, that is not ideal, but make no mistake, he's a good player. He's played all over the place, most recently at Georgia Tech in 2024, then Texas Tech in 2025. Sometimes he's an edge rusher, sometimes he's a stand-up linebacker. He was a linebacker in high school, really quick first step, explosive off the snap, fast enough that if he doesn't win right away, he can still make another explosive move and win in the 2nd half of the rep. Like I talked about, that is something that translates to the NFL really well, where often you're not going to win your first half of the rep, especially early in your career. At times, he can be so fast that even if he is moved vertical, he can still get after the quarterback from behind. He can change directions, flip his hips really well, force quarterbacks to step up in the pocket and still have a mental timer on, because just because he misses them initially doesn't mean he's not coming right back and chasing them to the sideline. He's a great cleanup guy for that reason, because he can chase quarterbacks and get them down before they're at the sideline. He plays hard through the whistle, never stops chasing. He can be so aggressive that he gets off balance at times. You saw that against Kansas State more than once. Although, honestly, if you want to see his ceiling, how he played against Kansas State was still pretty awesome. He got this strip sack that led to a recovery and a touchdown, complete regaining of momentum. He plays hard to a fault, which is a coachable problem. You would so much rather coach somebody down from being over aggressive than try to coach them up to having the confidence to play aggressive. So, teams are going to like that. There was a play against Utah where he dives for the quarterback and misses, and then gets up and chases him all the way to the sideline with a teammate, and the quarterback ends up panicking and throwing an interception. Most players are not getting up and fighting for the play like that. So clearly you have a good, hardworking team player kind of guy when he's on the field. His bend is awesome. It is so hard to stop him from going outside that, he can run that corner so tightly. He doesn't have a great counter to that. If he is stopped to the outside, you'd like to see more successful cross chops or swim moves, but I think on the right NFL team, he can develop that. Again, he's a lighter player, so he's going to have to be very technically sound, but I think he can be someone who can be developed into being a very lethal 3rd and long player. It's not like he doesn't do these moves. Sometimes they look solid, but sometimes they break down against larger tackles with long, strong arms, who don't have to extend their arms a lot to keep him away. And I don't want to sound like I don't see the potential. He's winning on instincts more than technique, which is something that can be improved in the NFL. NFL. He does have pass rush moves, like I said, they're just not very refined. His spin move isn't very tight, so even when it works, it kind of throws him off of his path to the quarterback, which buys the quarterback a little bit more time. I think an NFL team's biggest challenge is we have to get him to play more refined and a lot less erratic, a lot more in control. He drops into coverage sometimes. Despite his speed, he doesn't always flip his hips like you would like. Sometimes he backpedals a little uncomfortably, gets off balance. He seems unsure of himself in zone coverage. NFL teams probably will not look at him as much of a viable option in coverage, at least early in his career, and see him more as a true pass rusher. He's definitely better in coverage than most edge rushers, but he's not going to compare to the real like off-ball linebackers in that regard. He isn't great against the run. I'm not going to talk too much about that. It's exactly what you'd expect. You know, he's a smaller guy. It's just not what he's built for. Not the snaps that he usually plays. This isn't really a 3-down player. Certainly not early in his career. Certainly not without putting on a lot of weight. He struggles to disengage against stronger tackles, which will only get worse in the NFL. He struggles to get tackles for loss because he is so fast and aggressive that shiftier running backs can kind of just sidestep him and keep it moving. His pad level is consistently too high to have any shot at speed to power, but you cannot say that he is not a violent and hungry player. That stands out immediately on tape. At the NFL level, he needs to put on like 15 pounds of muscle. He may or may not be able to do that his rookie year. He may not be able to be more than a rotational third down edge rusher, second and long kind of edge rusher in his rookie year, or he can stay at his current weight and really be locked into that rotational role. There are definitely people who've had long, successful careers in that regard. Since he's lighter and struggles at open field opportunities, I would not take him higher than the early of the third round, and even then realistically I probably wouldn't want to, just because I don't love the lighter, shorter arm kind of edge rushers. That's not the kind of edge rusher I would take, but there are definitely schemes where he will make a lot of sense. Different teams are going to have different ideas about how confident they are that they can develop a player physically. Some teams have had a lot of success at, body recomposition, and that's something that I think that teams are going to have to look at with him. Like I said, he'll start his rookie contract at 25. That calls into question how much he can develop physically. Different teams are going to interpret that differently, but I definitely would favor younger players, which is why he's a lot lower in my list than I think he is for some other players. And I think it's important he goes to a team that doesn't need his run stopping ability right away, that can afford to spend a, somewhat high pick, because I think it kind of falls off after this, on a pure pass rush kind of player. But if your team picked him, just know you have a guy who plays hard from snap to whistle. You have someone who will do anything he can to make an impact. He doesn't have to win right away. He plays as hard as he possibly can through all 4 quarters, has super high ceiling in the pass rush game with the right team. I hope I didn't make you doubt him, because understand that I am not as high as the consensus is on him. The consensus seems to put him early to mid second round, and that's just not where I am with him. I don't like how easily he can be flushed out in the run game, but I think people will see his potential athletically. Watch his highlights. There is so much to like there, and like I said, he plays hard, and that's the main trait you're looking for in an edge rusher. Last I have at number 10, R. Mason Thomas out of Oklahoma, number 32, 6'2", 249 pounds. It was really close, between him and Romelo height. I keep going back and forth. I'm in my final rankings. I may end up having R. Mason Thomas a little bit higher. This was a 4-star recruit out of Florida. His freshman and sophomore year, he had these ankle issues. It caused him to miss some time. He missed some time this year as well, unfortunately. So different teams are going to evaluate injuries to a different extent. He played really well on the big stage. Great run stops from the edge versus Alabama in the first round of the playoffs. He's very smart in the run game, very good at reading the blocking scheme, getting behind the line of scrimmage. He's very fast, solid sideline to sideline speed. He's strong, got great natural leverage. And I love how he uses being a smaller player to get tackles off balance. That's something when somebody doesn't necessarily have the height that you want, it's like, okay, how can you use that to your advantage in terms of leverage? Because a lot of the time the tackles you're going against are 6'6" or taller, and you need every advantage you can get. And he appears to have somewhat short arms. When you combine that with his lack of extensive pass rush moves, it's a little concerning. That's why I have him a little lower on the list, but he does have a solid club, rip, swipe, just not much beyond that. And he's not extremely technically sound with those. Sometimes when the blocker counters his move, he still tries to force it to the outside, and that'll work sometimes, but it's entirely dependent on being stronger than the guy in front of him, and that's just not going to be the case all the time in the NFL. All right, guys, we got two cats in the frame. We got one right here and one back there. She's been there the whole time. I don't know if you guys could see her. This is a really smart run defender. He does miss tackles a bit, which I think, is a symptom of him being smaller. About 17% pass rush win rate, which I think is really solid. This is probably, to me, third rounder. I think he'll end up going a little bit higher than that, just because I think people are going to see a lot of that athletic potential, but I think he needs a coach who can specifically teach him to use his hands better, and I think that's going to take time. I don't think this is really a plug and play kind of guy. This could be great edge rusher depth for his rookie year, because the athletic traits are there. He's fast, really strong lower body, which I think, a lot of defensive line coaches really value, but he's shorter. He's got shorter arms. It shows in his limitations. It probably prevents him from being a true 3-down edge rusher, at least early in his career, but he absolutely can be an important player on, a team's pass rush plan. To me, this is probably someone I grade as early third rounder who could be taken in the mid to late second round as well. So those are my top 10. I do have a quick honorable mention. Derek Moore out of Michigan, number 8, 6'3", 260 pounds. For me, this is an outside linebacker for the most part, stand-up rusher. He's a really good bull rusher, good with push pulls and swipes. Athleticism isn't amazing, but the size and the arm length is great. His jump off the snap is fantastic, great timing, good bend to get around the outside. He gets a lot of batted passes down because of that arm length, which his arms appear to be over 34 inches. That's, just judging off of the film. Not very versatile, but he's very good at what he does, plays with a very high motor. He can be a great finisher, kind of complementary piece for a team, and I think as he gets stronger in the NFL, he should be a pretty impressive bull rusher and pocket crusher. 19.8% pass rush win rate, pretty incredible considering how little pass rush moves he really brings to the table. I think that could be very exciting to NFL scouts who look at his long-term potential as higher once he gets better use of his hands. Right now, I think he'd just kind of be a third down kind of bull rushing player, but he has the traits, so if he can make that jump as a run stopper, and he physically has what he needs to do that, I think he could become an every down kind of player, but you would have to see him as a developmental project to want to draft him. You have to be able to afford to invest a pick for a few years down the line. I like him as a prospect, great traits, great production, but with a lack of run stopping ability up front, I'm not sure you'd want to take him earlier than the third round, but I still think he's an exciting prospect and there's a lot to look forward to. And Michigan has produced some really good trench players in recent years. So those are my main players. Obviously, I'm still looking at some other players who I think could make a big impact. We saw Mikhail Kamara, or maybe it's Kamara, from Indiana, make a really big impact on the national championship run. I love how he plays, so I could definitely see his stock rising. These are not my final rankings by any means. Besides the fact that we got to look back at the tape, we are also going to start hearing coaches and teammates talk about these players and talk about, how did teams scheme against them and what kind of impact were they able to have that maybe on film it doesn't show because, teams schemed away from them. We're going to find out more about their character. We're going to see, generally how teams feel about them after they interview them and things like that. So I think that Kamara could definitely be a riser. And like I said, I didn't really evaluate players that I consider linebackers. So if you're concerned about, I'm not talking about Arvell Reese or Akeem Mesidor or players like that, I'm looking at them more as linebackers. Like I said, I'll be doing a film breakdown for most of these players. I think this is a solid edge class. If you are looking to add blue chip talent, I do think that you probably need a top 20 pick to do that. But there are going to be great options, I think, all the way through the third round. And, I think some of these players, maybe you look at them more as defensive tackles. I think this is a very versatile edge class, which I think is great news if you have a creative defensive coordinator who wants to do a lot of simulated pressures, drop different people into coverage, things like that. But let me know what your rankings are. Let me know what names you think should be in the top 10 so that I can get to work on watching all the film I possibly can before the draft. Next position I'm looking to evaluate is linebacker, but let me know if there is a position more interesting than that. I'm also keeping an eye on the tight end class. Again, shout out to members. You guys saw this video early, as you do with every draft content. My film breakdowns will be exclusive for members. Really appreciate all you guys for subscribing, liking, commenting, everything else, and let me know what you want to see next time. I'll be back to covering the Chargers later this week, as always, but if you are seeing this on my main channel, I'm already back to doing that. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate those of you who like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.